Welcome to this episode of the Aquarist's Edge, a podcast for home aquarists just like you. Learn more about how to keep a thriving aquarium and discover ideas and tips to give your aquarium the edge. And now, over to our host, Arthur Preston.
Welcome everybody to this episode of the Aquarist's Edge. Today we're doing something a little bit different. This is the first of our, hopefully will be a series of video podcasts. And today I'm very pleased to be hosting Tristan, who is the owner of Simply Aquatic Cape Town. Many of you would have seen him on his YouTube channels, maybe part of the WhatsApp groups. And it's a great privilege to be able to chat with Tristan today about his journey in the hobby and to discuss all things fish keeping and shrimp and all the things that have brought you to this podcast in the first place. So Tristan, nice to have you with us.
Thank you so much, man. The honor's all mine. It's a privilege to be on the podcast. I've spent so many hours listening to the great things that you talk about, and it's an awesome killer for traffic, I'll tell you that much. So I'm really happy to be on the show.
Great. Glad it's useful. So maybe if you could introduce yourself a bit by telling us your story, how you got into fish keeping, what attracted you specifically to shrimp, a lot of your time and energy at the moment,
Yeah.
and perhaps a specific experience or a conversation or a meeting with somebody who got you hooked into this.
That's a pretty loaded question. I think I can answer it, but I'll try my best to sort of subjectize it if I can.
That's fine.
So my first sort of entry into the hobby was a very random one. My wife and I had just moved into our new place. We'd just gotten married. And I decided for some reason, I was like, we need a fish tank. I mean, that's a cool thing to have, right? Like that'll spruce up the house. And I thought that was a conversation that we had, but she apparently didn't. So I went and I bought a fish tank. I brought it back home, and she was like, "What is this thing? We didn't talk about this, you know." But thankfully, it fit exactly where I intended it for it to fit, and it worked out. The dimensions were great. However, when it came to stocking that tank, I had the worst experience you could ever imagine. So I only watched like one or two YouTube videos. I was like, "Yep, this is sick. I know what I'm doing." Rushed down to the fish store. I bought cichlids and plants the same day that I put water in the tank. It's kind of embarrassing to admit this, but I made every mistake that you can possibly make when it comes to setting up a tank. And within the same hour that the water went in, the fish and the plants did as well. And as you can imagine, it was an absolutely disastrous tank. I didn't lose any of the fish, thankfully. We've got really good water here in Cape Town. But obviously, cichlids, planted tanks, it just doesn't work. And I was quite despondent. I was like, you know, why do I have to clean this thing every 3 days and unbeknownst to me reset the entire nitrogen cycle? So it was quite a tough one. And I kind of got to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm going to just chuck this thing away. Like I'm However, I did a bit of a Google, and I came to find Graham from Gapedi Tanks. And I gave him a call. I said to him, listen, like, what am I doing wrong? You know, and he said, no, it's fine. Join my WhatsApp group and I'll kind of, you know, I'll give you a bit of a rundown on how to set a tank up. And it kind of just spiraled from there. Then I actually started learning how to look after fish properly. I started watching YouTube videos. I got into shrimp. About 6 months later, I realized, these things actually exist. I didn't even know that they existed. And it kind of just spiraled from there. I think once the bug bites, a lot of us will be able to empathize with that. You know, the first tank comes, and once it starts looking good, you kind of want the second tank. And fast forward about a year and a couple of months after that, I now have 44 tanks and an entire dedicated shrimp room, and I've got another 10 tanks on the way. So
that's amazing. Yeah, I think you're right. You know, when the bug bites, as you say, it definitely grabs you. And if we have very understanding partners and spouses, we are all systems go. So yeah, that's awesome.
And they have to unfortunately become understanding quite quickly as well, I suppose.
So since those early days, how has your approach to aquarium keeping evolved? I mean, do you now have a particular philosophy or guiding principle that you follow?
I wouldn't say it's as deep as that. Honestly, you know, if you the question of like, how did you get into this? I still can't answer. I'm not quite sure how that bug got a hold of me so quickly. I've always been someone that creates digital content. I've been a YouTuber before the fish thing, like long before that. And
Mm.
I don't know, I just kind of like really, I draw inspiration pretty quickly, and I started watching these YouTube channels of, MD fish tanks, keeping fish simple,
Mm.
bark shrimp tanks, all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I don't know, when you find an interest in something, you kind of just, I'm also big into my hobbies. Like I go really hard when it comes to something that I enjoy. I fast and make all the mistakes and learn quickly, and then
Mm.
I'm in it.
Mm.
And the same kind of thing happened with the fish tanks, and then shrimp like really, really intrigued me because, the fish stuff was cool. And I really love fish. I'm getting into breeding more fish now. And I think there's a steeper learning curve with fish than what there is with shrimp, specifically like Caridina shrimp. And I just loved the variety that you could get, the different colors and things like that. And I said to my wife, like, come, at the point at that time, I no longer had a drift car, and we had the garage sitting empty. So I was like, well, you know what? Let me get a couple of tanks. Let's try and breed some different colors, and just for the fun of it. And it very quickly spiraled from just get 4 tanks to 8 to 16 to now it's a completely built room with insulation and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I said to her, like, well, I've got the space. I'm doing this thing already. I've got the camera. Let me make some videos. Who knows? Maybe someone's actually interested in what I'm doing, and it could be cool to someone, because there were other videos out there that inspired me. Maybe, perchance, I could do the same for someone else. And that's when I launched the whole Simply Aquatic thing. That's where that came
Mm.
about. And just like that, Simply Aquatic. I didn't even come up with the name. I was like, it's Simply Aquatic. That's fine. Like we could run with that,
Mm.
The tagline is shrimp and fish breeding. I mean, it doesn't get more original than that, I suppose. And for some reason, it just absolutely took off. The first video that I posted got like 2,000 views. I got insanely good feedback on it. People were like, this is exciting. Show us more. We want to know more. And it kind of just carried on growing from there. I really enjoy it. I love making videos. I love breeding shrimp and fish. And I think it's just wonderful to be able to behold nature in a small tank. And, there's so much vast like learning that you can gain from that experience. It's just been it's energized me to continue doing more, and it just keeps growing.
I think it's very evident in the videos that you have a deep passion for what you do. And earlier on, you mentioned, in the beginning, you watched people like MD Fish Tanks, Keeping Fish Simple, and others. How does it feel to you now to think that there are people out there, maybe youngsters, maybe people who've been in the hobby for a while, or folks just starting out, who will find you on YouTube and go, I want to be like that guy. You're now becoming inspiration for many people. How does that feel to you?
I mean, I firstly really appreciate that. It's quite hard to actually accept that as a reality, if I could say that, because it's still very new to me. I mean, I started this thing a couple of months ago, and it's really like grown much bigger than my expectation. I think my first goal for the first year of YouTube was like 5,000 subscribers, and we've blown past 10,000 before the first year of YouTube. So it's been quite crazy, and I have had some people say, it's your videos that have inspired me to do this or such, or try this recipe or whatever the case may be. But I think, at the very core of it, it's an indirect re-inspiration of myself, because it just validates the effort that I've been putting into the hobby, because, it's a lot of work, and it's at times a lot of money as well that, has to go into specifically something, as you would know, like building a fish room. Even if you've just got 5 or 10 tanks, it's a lot of effort,
Yeah,
and
it is.
to see that making a positive difference in someone else's life, a younger person's life, bringing someone into the hobby, making something easier or more accessible for someone that might not have known that before. It's awesome. I mean, I feel just on a deeper level, there's nothing better to do with your time than to make an impact on other people,
Correct.
And it's super awesome. Like I really, there's no other way to say it. It energizes me. Like you said, I've developed such a passion for it. And I just love what I do, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Tristan, you spoke about getting into shrimp and realizing that actually this was an area you wanted to, let's say, specialize in. It doesn't mean you're not breeding fish, but shrimp is what you really have become known for, particularly through your channel. Is there a particular favorite shrimp that you might have? When somebody's starting out with shrimp, where would they begin?
That's quite a difficult question. I don't particularly have a favorite, because I think there's so many new lines coming out all the time. There's some amazing breeders all over the world that are doing some really incredible things. And I think that's why I like it so much, is just because there is so much, there's vast genealogy that I'm only scratching the surface. So I'm trying to like learn genetics now. And I've managed to, even in my own capacity, in a very short amount of time, put some different shrimp together and get some cool colors. And I'm working on my own like lineage of Caridina right now. And
Mm.
I don't know, that was really exciting to me. Whereas I think like with fish keeping, a lot of it is pretty standard stuff. There's ways of doing things, and there isn't that much innovation possibility in that because people have really perfected it. I mean, fish keeping has been it's a century old thing. Like people have been doing it for many years, and I think it's a very developed hobby. Whereas the shrimp stuff, I don't know. At least for me, in my experience, it seems like it's a very new thing. Like although it's been around for quite a few years, it's like one of those niche hobbies within the aquarium hobby. You've got your aquascapers. They're big and bold and loud and beautiful. Fish breeders, same thing. Different types of fish tanks. It's commonplace. Shrimp are kind of amazing, but not really that big. The YouTubers that I'm talking about that are specifically shrimp guys are much smaller than the guys that do broader sort of fish breeding and tankscaping and stuff like that. And I think for me, the biggest sort of like flip of the switch was when I discovered Caridina shrimp, seeing like, okay, there's actually a level to this that's a lot more elite, if I can say it that, just because it's a whole lot harder to look after certain types of shrimp, but the endless possibilities that then come with that. With your Caridina's, there's a couple of colors and there's a couple of variants of those colors, but it's not as expansive as Caridina. And I just got hooked. I was like, what? You can breed your own. So from a scientific perspective, we are in the space where you can still breed your very own lineage of shrimp, and you make your own sort of patterns and colors. And if you can breed that into a true line, you can name it, because that's how new this is. It's not a developed hobby, if I can say that, because there's still new species being created by humans. I mean, how cool is that? And so, I think that's just kind of what, like, it completely engulfed me. And I was like, look, I love the fish, but I need to make as many tanks as I can for shrimp, so I can just have an awesome collection of them. And I'm completely hooked.
And so for those who are starting out, I mean, you mentioned Neo's got you in, but Caridina is what's keeping you. Somebody wants to get into shrimp keeping. Where do they start? What do they need to do? What do they need to get hold of?
I think, like, if I had to give you the advice now, having made all the mistakes that I've made, and I say that with absolute pride, I've made every mistake in the book. I would start with some Caridinas, but before even getting something, I would do the research. Try to, and when I say do the research, I don't mean find out what you have to do. See if you are willing to do what is required, because at the end of the day, it's one thing to read an article that says, you need this type of water parameter, you need this type of tank, this type of substrate, whatever the case may be, Neo or Caridina. But for your personal situation, if you're only going to have one tank, but your tap water is extremely bad, you might need to buy filtered water or something like that. Your situation is going to be different to mine. Everybody's going to have their own set of circumstances when it comes to, and it's the same thing with fish. And when I give people advice, I say, do the research, but not only to find out what you need to do, but try and find out if you're willing to do what is need to be done. Because at the end of the day, it's easy to run Caridina tanks, but there's still plenty of guys out there that are really struggling with them, because they might have a specific set of circumstances that makes their care for those shrimp a little bit more difficult or complicated or intricate. And they're applying the same sort of textbook research principles to their tanks when they should actually be doing something a little bit different. So I think that would be the first step, is like, in your specific scenario, what needs to be done to have the right parameters in your tank to look after whatever type of shrimp or fish that you're looking to keep, and to see if you are willing to take care of that. Can you do the upkeep? Can you afford the things that go around that? If it's like a really expensive shrimp and you have very high care levels, do you want to spend that money? Do you want to spend that time? And if those are all yeses, go grab whatever you want. I think if you approach it that way, there is actually no argument for getting Neos versus Caridina. If you're willing to do the work, you are probably ready to take on any kind of challenge, because like I said, you'd be willing to overcome that challenge and make sure that they have the correct environment.
Right. And at what point, in your opinion, having, as you said, made the mistakes you have, as we all do, at what point do you think somebody should say, look, it doesn't look like taking shrimp further than simply having cherry shrimp in my community tank is what I need to do? At what point do they say, I'm done, I want to have a community tank. I want to have a couple of red cherry shrimp in there, maybe some other basic neos, but taking anything further maybe isn't for me.
That's a tricky one, because I mean, you're asking the guy that refused to say that he's done. I've wasted so much money on figuring stuff out and doing things wrong and resetting tanks and time and effort and more money, and it's been a big steep learning curve for me, because I did everything wrong. I think, like I said, from the start, you should be able to make that decision. If you're doing the research with the right direction, before you make the mistakes, you'd be able to ascertain how much effort do I actually want to spend on this thing. If I already have a fish tank and I just want a cleanup crew, get yourself some basic neos, chuck them in there, and you're good to go.
Absolutely.
I don't think it should actually get to that point where people are going, geez, am I done with this? Am I not going to try anymore? However, if you are someone that's listening and you find yourself in the middle, where maybe you rushed into it, you grabbed a bunch of shrimp that you can't look after, or that requires a lot more effort than you originally anticipated, I would say now's the time to make that decision. Figure out now, is it too much for you? There's no shame in backing out. There's no shame in saying, I bought these very expensive Caridina shrimp, I can't look after them. Instead of losing them, try and sell them for a lower price, and just get rid of them in a safe and humane way. Get them to someone that can look after them, that's willing to do that effort, and then pivot, change your idea of what you're doing. And I think that was
I think that's it. Sorry to interrupt. I do think that is it. I think it's a case of realizing where your own limitations lie, because I think the idea of getting to a point where you realize maybe this isn't for me, and then having to, as you say, pivot, is critical. And that doesn't matter if you're breeding shrimp or breeding fish, or do you now you've got one tank, do you want to go to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10? You've got to be willing to make the effort and put in the time to do that. If the idea of a fish room is going to be more exciting than the work required to keep the fish room, rather don't have the fish room.
And I think also just don't underestimate how much work it actually is. Like,
absolutely.
Once you go over 10 tanks, it's pretty arguably like a full-time job. But back, if I had to sum it up into a sentence, pivoting is what saved my position in the hobby, because I'm the guy that didn't give up, but I had to pivot. What I was doing was not working, so I had to figure out a way to make it work. And the reality is, and I'll tell you this very honestly, I'm actually making a video on the mistakes that I've made and how I rectified it. I'm running my tanks in a different way to what you're going to read on the internet. Some guys will say, these are the parameters you need to keep these shrimp in, and they're going to be perfect. And I was losing shrimp at those parameters. I was chasing those parameters and had them spot on, and I still had dead shrimp. Whereas now I've actually got some parameters that are completely out of the recommended where they should be. However, for the water that I'm keeping, at the temperatures I'm keeping it, the set of variables that are unique to me have allowed me to find success within that. That's completely different to what I read. And the only way that I was able to do that was by pivoting and saying, okay, fine, I'm going to try something that is not this. And then it worked. So being willing to change the original, the idea that you had, I think that's what's going to save a lot of people from giving up, so to speak.
And that requires wisdom and maturity. And, it's that challenge of when do I pivot? What do I do when I pivot? Those are important conversations. But let's just talk about your shrimp room for a moment. Shrimp room was a new word for me when I got into this hobby some years ago. Fish room was a standard word, but it seems that there are folks now, such as yourself, who, now have a shrimp room, so to speak. And the one that you've set up in your home, we've seen pictures of it on your videos. You've recently done a rebuild, which is very impressive. And, lots of people would love to have that kind of setup in their homes. So could you describe what you have for those who haven't seen it and how you went about setting it up?
So, okay, to describe it, it's very basic. It's a single garage, separate building to my house. So it's not part of the house. It shares a wall, because we live in a complex with duplexes. So it's like a double garage that's been split in the middle. And within this garage, we've built a 3-meter cubed room out of rhino board with insulation in between, dual layer. So it's kind of like the stuff that you would see in a bank, like the office blocks that they build out of that, plasterboard or whatever you want to call it. And we've essentially insulated this 3x3 meter room inside. And then within that, I've got 2 industrial shelf or racking systems. There are 4 racks on each of the shelves or on each of the sides. which allows me to keep, I have space for 27 Caridina tanks and then 21 Caridina tanks with an additional 4 small tanks at the back. If you've seen my videos, it's for the fish breeding. Currently, I have a Gertrude project going in there. And then I've got one last rack for an Oro storage system. So you're looking at about 2 tons of like liquid water storage and tank space. And yeah, I think I've got about 20 different kinds of shrimp at the moment. So it's pretty intricate, but once you've wrapped your head around it, it's actually pretty simple. I think that I've managed to demystify the whole thing by creating automated processes. So I've got Wi-Fi timers and switches for the lights. I've got tap systems that allow me to make Oro water fill up the tanks automatically. I've got float valves and all of them. So there's a lot of stuff that I've done that is a bit, I would say, overkill, but it allows me to run the room in a way where it doesn't take over my entire life, but I am able to run it at scale.
Okay, and then just looking back, I mean, I would encourage folks to go watch that video you recently put out around the rebuild. It's fascinating and it tells the story. And,
it's backbreaking.
Yeah, indeed. Now, if you look back now, having now been through that, sweated blood through the process, what was your biggest learning curve in the whole thing? In the time you spent, the effort you made, the resources you put in, what was the biggest learning curve?
Are we talking about like from the rebuild process or from when I first even started the entire thing? Like
first set up and then reflecting on what you had and going, well, actually, I now need to make a change.
I think neglecting the obvious, I think that was like my biggest learning curve, because there's some things that are just logical. You put you build an insulated room and you put a bunch of water inside there, you're going to deal with humidity issues. And I knew that from the start. So I invested in a dehumidifier and I was like, sick, this is going to be great. I don't have to worry about anything. But I didn't realize that the dehumidifier generates a lot of heat, thinking, oh, this is great, it's going to keep the room warm, but the Caridinas need to be cold. And then I was like, oh, this and that. So it was a lot of developing problems due to the scale. So the whole reason of building the room in the first place was, once I got to 10 tanks, I said to my wife, I was like, we're going to have a problem in winter because I'm running multiple heaters. And for those that are international that don't know about load shedding, our power gets switched off quite regularly, especially during winter. And what that meant was that I was going to be risking all the livestock, because if the power goes off, we don't have heaters. And even if the power doesn't go off, we're going to be using a lot of electricity to power all of these tanks and keep them warm in an ice cold garage. So it was kind of a case of, as soon as I scaled to more tanks, I faced a problem. Then I created a solution for that problem, which then allowed me to scale a bit more, creating another problem. So it was very much, if I can say it, a haphazard build. I was very retroactive in fixing issues that I was creating, rather than sort of progressive and planning ahead. And that was the reason for this whole rebuild. Originally, I thought, okay, I'm going to buy these industrial racking systems and I'm going to be able to put a whole bunch of tanks in. They can all be the same. My OCD will be pleased and I can scale the system. However, I bought 1-ton beams thinking, oh, this is going to be safe. 700 kgs on a 1-ton beam. It's fine. It can carry the weight. But those beams then started to bow, which meant I couldn't put the tanks right next to each other. They would break. So I had to put less tanks in because I was spacing them out and using all the space. Now I technically downgraded my racking system to a 2.4 meter system rather than 2.6. And you'd think less space, less tanks. But because I upgraded the beams to 2 tons, I can put more tanks in. And a lot of it was like, replacing inefficiency that was actually a brilliant idea at the time. Oh, I'll just create an air loop system and run the air down from the roof to the tanks, no problems. But I ended up using hundreds of meters of airline versus just creating a rack loop system in the first place. So if you go and watch that video, I encourage you to, because I spent a lot of hours breaking my back to redo that and get all that time-lapse footage together. You'll see what I mean. A lot of perfectly good ideas that were actually incredibly inefficient due to the scale of the room, but it was only visible after I had done it. So I think I don't know if this is like the right answer to the question, but if you are considering to do something like this, try your best to plan for every eventuality. If you're going to build a room or you're going to build a rack or whatever it is, even if you're looking at a singular tank solution for whatever shrimp you want to, try and figure out what the problems are going to be ahead of time and build a system that doesn't need to be fixed. Because I think the biggest learning curve was like how expensive it would be to do it the way that I did it. It was actually a very budget build the first time I did it, plus the renovation. But because I had to do it in that, like, fixing problems as I go, it ended up being a really expensive endeavor and it didn't need to be. So yeah, my advice would be try and plan ahead.
Fair enough. Right. So we've mentioned your YouTube channel a couple of times. You run a very successful channel. As you say, you've blew up in subscribers and views very quickly. I'll put the link to the YouTube video or YouTube channel into the description so that folks can go and have a look and see for themselves. And I do encourage you to do so. Tristan's videos are fantastic to watch and very inspirational. So very educational. So go and have a look.
I try. Thank you.
You're doing a great job, Bill. You're doing a great job. Doing a great job. What was your reason? I mean, you've mentioned this slightly earlier on, but what was your reason for starting that channel? You are a videographer, you have skills in that area and knowledge and expertise, but you didn't have to start a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
What was it that got you, or what was it that kind of motivated you to say, I'm going to spend several hours now filming, editing, perfecting a video that's going to go up on YouTube for thousands of people to see? That's giving you extra work.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
I think, this kind of goes back like almost 12 years, sort of the start of my entire career. I once was, when I first got my license, I started driving a car and I started watching YouTube videos on how to make your car faster because I had a very slow car at the time, and I was like, hey, I want to make this thing faster, And one of the guys that I watched just said, he's a full-time YouTuber, and he was like, I just want to thank you guys for making this possible. And I want to say to you that if you are someone that wants to do this, go out, buy a camera and start YouTubing. Like, it's such a cool thing to do what you love for work. It's not work, and that like really stuck with me. And that's actually what got me into YouTubing in the first place. I used to YouTube drifting cars and building cars, and like I was very much an automotive YouTuber long before I even knew that fish would ever be a thing. And that then spilled over into my passion for videography and cameras and becoming a bit of a nerd when it comes to like editing and stuff like that, and which then spilled over into eventually building a business, specifically a digital business. And I think for me, it's very much it's a deep-seated belief that I owe pretty much everything that I have to those that have made the sacrifice of making videos and inspiring others. I got my inspiration from someone on YouTube. I got my inspiration when it comes to fish from someone that helped me, sacrificially. They didn't expect anything in return. Graham shared all of his ideas, and he was very welcoming of me into the hobby. Same thing with Stefana, same thing with yourself. There's plenty of guys in the hobby that have sacrificially given time and energy to helping others, expand their hobby and interest, and sort of just welcome people into the space. And I think for me, like, you mentioned that it's a very successful channel and it's a very successful fish room. Like, I've yet to still even scratch the surface of what I believe is going to be successful. But I look at it and I'm like, I thoroughly enjoy what I'm doing. I have an awesome shrimp room. I've got a whole bunch of different shrimp. I really get to enjoy this for many hours of the day. Even though some people will look at it as maintenance and work and stuff like that, I'm thoroughly passionate about this. And it's very much an asset to who I am as a person and my life. And I owe that to those that sacrificially put out videos or shared information or took the time to help me to get to the point that I am. And that's kind of where the whole idea of YouTube came from. It, for me, is not very much a case of building a business or a following or anything like that. It's actually my way of saying, I'd like to give back to the hobby. I'd like to be what someone else was for me at one point. And yeah, I know it's a very sort of, it might come across as like very deep or sort of altruistic, but the idea is that someone helped me. If I can help one other person in the hobby, then it's a fair trade. That way, if you scale it, and if I help one person, they help one person, there will always be enough help for those that need to come in, and for those that are here, we're giving back. And that's pretty much what it is. It's a lot of extra work and time and effort. I really enjoy doing it. I really enjoy YouTube. I really enjoy meeting new people, building a community around that. I've met so many awesome people. I've actually made friends through YouTube, not only in the car space, but also in the fish space. So for me, it's very much a case of like the idea behind it, or the purpose is to give back. But even within trying to do that, it's just been so beneficial to me. It's just it's like a loop of a system that it just works.
You and I have often spoken about the idea of the fish keeping community. And that's what it is. It's about community. It's about people who share a passion and a love for what they do
Yeah.
in this space, coming together, sharing ideas, learning from one another, sharing their mistakes, and
Yeah.
venting a bit when we need to. But I think that's where the power of learning together comes into play. And for you, it's a lot of that is through your YouTube channel and the personal interactions. For others, it might be, in my case, obviously with the podcast, I'm enjoying doing that, and certainly from the feedback I've had, some folks are really enjoying that and finding benefit from it. Others will be more kind of in person. Folks come around to their fish room, to their home, and they chat and they get ideas. I think the community of fish keepers is vital in growing the hobby. So thank you to you for what you do, and for keeping the energy and the passion alive through folks being able to watch the YouTube videos and learning so much from your own experiences. So thank you for that.
Right back at you, man. Like you asking me a question that you could answer yourself. You're doing the podcast. It's a very sacrificial thing. It takes hours and hours to assimilate all the information that you've been dissecting and relaying to us in a very concise way. It's super beneficial to the hobby. You've been helping tons of people, and I'm pretty sure you know exactly what it feels like. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It is a circle of inspiration where you can help others, gives you energy to carry on with doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And
100%.
And let's be honest, man. It's fun. It's fun to meet someone that had a tank, that did something, and they were like, "Oh yeah, and this happened." And it's like, "Damn, I've never experienced that. That's so cool for you, and thanks for sharing it with me." The whole point of this hobby is exploratory. I don't think anyone has figured out whether it's aquascaping or shrimp breeding or anything like that. I don't think there is a way of doing things. Everyone's got their little hacks and tips and tricks of this is how I make my water, or this is how I clean my substrate, whatever it might be. It's just so cool. It's so cool to share that with other people. It's like you said, it's community. That's the purpose.
I agree. All right, so Tristan, you speak about time, and definitely there is a lot of time involved in this, whether it be producing YouTube videos or doing maintenance, setup, that kind of thing. But you're also a husband, and you're a business owner outside of the aquarium space. Yeah. So how do you balance all of this successfully?
Oh man, it's very much an opinionated thing to be saying that I balance it successfully.
Well, that's the perception.
Yeah, that's the perception, man. I think editing plays a big role in that. To be honest with you, man, I need to give my wife a lot of credit. She has been pretty much the biggest support and rock as far as everything that I do, from running a business to running the shrimp room to doing the YouTube channel. She is actually the behind the scenes actor that makes it all possible. And it's been amazing. From day one, we kind of got into this thing, and I sat her down. I was like, "Are you sure? Can I do this thing?" Because she knows me very well. She knows if I come up with a new hobby or something I'm interested in, she knows, okay, here we go. Now we're starting now. And in a couple of months from now, it's probably going to be the next big thing. And that's exactly what it was. Like I said, we started with one tank, we went to 3, we went back down to 1, and then suddenly now we've got 40. So I definitely give her all the credit. When it comes to balancing it all, I'd say, there's a lot of sacrifice that comes into that. I think for people in my age group, I don't know what age group I am anymore, but I'm kind of at that point where, a lot of my peers are doing things that I used to do that I no longer do. So, going out on weekends, I'm doing water changes, having some friends over for a braai or something like that, I'm editing a video, So it's very much a case of sacrificing and shuffling around priorities and things like that. However, I don't want it to make it sound bleak. You say sacrifice and think, oh, shame, you've got to give up so much for this hobby. Not really, because it's a priority to me. I thoroughly enjoy what I get out of this hobby. So, other things I might enjoy less, so I don't do them anymore. And now I've got time for the hobby. It's the same thing with my business. As far as the business is concerned, I still don't consider it a business at all. It's my passion. I love creating content for people. I love doing marketing. It's just one of those things that I really, really enjoy doing. I love the tech behind it. I like playing with cameras, to be quite honest with you. And I've just been extremely blessed and privileged to be able to monetize that in a way that I can be active in the hobbies and the things that interest me, and they don't have to cost me money all the time so that they end up stopping when I run out of money. It's a case of these things are self-sustaining, and it's been a super privileged position to be in. And then going back to your previous question, that's again why I do what I do. I've been privileged to get to a point where I've got so many tanks that I get to enjoy. All I want to do is share it with other people, because that I feel it's kind of like my responsibility. There's a lot of guys out there that probably will never be able to hold 50 tanks just because they don't have the time. They have so much family responsibility. They've got kids, they run schools, like yourself. There's people like that might not be able to get to that scale, but would love to just see what it looks like or be somewhat involved in that. And if I'm able to do that by letting people come and look at my room, watch my videos, get them some shrimp that they can, try and breed with or whatever, because they've only got one tank. That's so cool. That's purpose to the hobby that I'm, involved in. And I think that's where the balance comes. It's prioritization, and then obviously, the things that you love. If you love it, you'll find time for it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the other things that you and I have spoken about is knowing when to stop. If I look at what I've built up, I mean, I now have 30 odd tanks in my fish room. I really won't go more than that, because then it becomes something that I can't do.
It becomes a chore,
and then it becomes a chore and not a hobby in which I can invest passion and time. And I don't want to get to a point where I'm saying this is becoming a chore. Oh no, I've got to go do water changes. Or, oh no, I've got to go do this or that with the fish room. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I think one's got to be able to invest time and energy to grow, and at some point turn around and go, I'm now at a point where I can invest in other aspects of the hobby, such as YouTube or educating others, whatever it might be, helping others out. And I'm not going to grow any further at this point. Maybe that'll come later, but right now, I now know where I need to draw the line. Would you agree with that?
I 100% agree. I think, it's rich coming from me because I kind of don't know where to stop. But I mean, I think for me, like a big reason behind doing the renovation that I did, I was just like, I want more tanks, man. I need more space. And, I was actually looking at like various different properties and going and saying, maybe this needs to leave my house and I need to get a dedicated space where I can do this. And after seriously, like for the first time in my life, actually preempting and seriously considering stuff before I just jump into it, I realized that, maybe this is gonna make it something that I don't enjoy. If I have to commute to get to my tanks versus just walking outside to the garage, that I don't know what that looks like. And it's kind of a big risk because like you said, we've got a large YouTube channel now. I feel sort of responsible for that community. People expect videos. They expect things, different tips and tricks. Like I've got a nice WhatsApp community, a very wholesome community, and there's lots of ideas flowing all the time, and I'm very actively involved in that. And I kind of just assumed that, if I'm going to risk potentially making this a pain, I'm going to be letting a lot of people down if I decide, actually, this is too much, I'm out. And then I decided, okay, well, I can still expand if I can just fix the beams, so it's a lot more work and it's a lot more figuring it out. But I think, knowing when to stop, or again, like I said, knowing when to pivot to best suit your needs, your set of circumstances. Some people need to rather spend the money on an auto water change system because they just absolutely cannot afford the time to do water changes. Versus other people, they've got the time, but they don't necessarily have the money for auto top-ups. Cool, then they do the water changes. Every person's got their own set of circumstances, and I think, do it in slow, measurable steps. Because I mean, like for me now, I knew that I wanted to do this renovation, and I calculated beforehand that I'm going to put an extra 10 tanks in there. And the time spent on running the current tanks versus an extra 10 is negligible because of the systems that I have. Do it in smaller than don't go get buy 10 tanks. I don't think I would never recommend that. But like you said, pivoting, stopping, find the balance that works for you.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Thanks. So let's talk about the future. What's next on the horizon for you in this hobby? Is it more tanks? Is it expanding the fish room? Is it, pivoting towards breeding specific lines? What's next?
I think right now I'm taking a community-led approach to the things that I do, both physically and digitally. So when it comes to the channel, it's got its own strategy and trajectory. I am focusing now more on fish. I want to get into some more fish stuff. I want to get into some more things that people don't generally have access to. I'm trying to leverage my network and my YouTube channel and the skills that I have to get access to certain things so I can share it with people that we wouldn't normally see. I want to try and do some more fish room tours of places that have actually not been discovered before. The guys that are private breeders and things like that. I'd like to get in there and I'd like to see that, not only for myself, but so that I can share it with others. I think in a physical aspect, I am busy with an expansion. I am getting another 10 tags for the room, but I think that's where it's going to end, because also for me, that's kind of the point where it's like, okay, cool, this room is built to maximum. It's at capacity, and it's still working like a well-oiled machine. And then, like I said, community-led approach. There's a couple of fish projects that I'm working on now. There's a couple of tips and trick projects that I'm working on. And I've also just launched a 3D printing business pretty much as of this morning. You'll see this fat thing standing behind me is the first addition to my print farm. But essentially trying to create capability for those that don't have access to 3D printing, or, the high costs that an actual 3D printing business might run. I'm going to be catering specific to the aquatic hobby. So filter upgrades, tank stands, things like, all the little bits and pieces that you can use in a fish room. I'm now offering as a service to those that, don't have access to it. You can send me a design or whatever. I can print it for you. I'm just charging people to cover the filament and electricity costs. So as far as like, there are a couple of things that I can't actually talk about. There's some pretty big plans that I'm working on, with a large number of sort of other people in the hobby that, there's a sort of underlying community that wants to really grow some pretty cool stuff specifically in South Africa. However, there's obviously no concrete plans right now, so I can't really share anything and create anticipation.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think overarching, a community-led approach. So what the community asks for, that's what I'm going to be focusing on.
Okay.
Like I said, my purpose is to give back. So that's the whole point behind it.
So let's pick up on that community thing as we come towards the end of this episode. How has that aquarium community helped, in playing a role in your journey? You've mentioned that a couple of times, but are there particular forums? Maybe, you've mentioned a couple of people. Maybe I should change the question more around how would you suggest someone who's watching this connect into that community so that they too can benefit from the wealth of experience and knowledge and passion that people such as yourselves bring to this hobby?
I think if blanket advice, and I promise you this is an unbiased opinion, YouTube is the place to be, because not only will you have very tangible, videographic, easy to digest information and content, and very tangible evidence of people doing the things that they're talking about doing. You can very easily see if a guy's recommending a certain way to keep shrimp. If his tank is empty, he's only got a couple of shrimp, it's probably not a good way, and other than that, that's just like the one aspect to it. At face value, it's very interconnected. It's a massive interconnected web of different aquarists and fish keepers and shrimp breeders and all that kind of stuff. And it's non-parasitic, which is what I love about YouTube. We all benefit from each other. If I'm marketing someone like Mark Shrimp Tanks, he's marketing someone like Shrimp Mania, who's marketing someone like me. There's a whole circle of information and people working together to grow the hobby, and I really like that. It's not a competitive place at all, as much as what people would think it is. For the aquarium niche, I don't find it to be like that. And again, that being the face value aspect, there is a deeper underlying level where if you look at any of my videos in the description, I've got a link to my WhatsApp group there. You can jump on that and very quickly ask, how do I find the Discus forum? And we'll help you. There's a huge community that you can very quickly tap into. Once you're in that first WhatsApp group, that first Discord channel, that first Telegram unit, whatever it is on any social media that you might join, it's very quick to get to your local groups and to your local breeders and find the people around you and get in touch with your local community. That's going to help you. And that would be my suggestion, because at the end of the day, it's one thing to be watching the guys in the UK breeding shrimp, but your set of circumstances are different, and it's better. Watch them, get inspiration from them, enjoy that content and learn from them. However, your local breeders are going to have answers to questions that you are going to have once you get into certain things. And I do actually want to give a shout out to Charles from Aquarium Advice South Africa. He's done an absolutely phenomenal job at building a massive knowledge bank on WordPress, and he's actually got a community forum there where he lists all the local WhatsApp groups. So there's Discus groups, there's breeding groups, your group, my group. There's a ton of groups on there for the specific topic that you might be interested in, for chat rooms if you just want to make friends in the hobby. So yeah, I would say, find whatever channel it is that you might want to begin with, but it's a very, very welcoming community. It's very easy to go from your first YouTube video to being in a WhatsApp group to knowing 100 people that live in your area that are interested in the same thing that you are.
Absolutely. That is great advice. And I think the other piece I would just add on to the end of that is don't be afraid to ask questions.
100%.
Don't be afraid to put your hand up and go, guys, I really don't know. I'm stuck. Or here's a picture of my fish. It's not looking good. I had one on the Ox Fisherman group this past week where somebody posted a picture with a fish who really wasn't well.
Yeah.
And folks were able to come along and say, well, try this, try that. Here's an idea what you could do. And there was a positive outcome.
Yeah.
So I think, don't be afraid to say, I don't know something. And that doesn't matter how many years you've been in the hobby or, ask the question, and folks will happily add to that knowledge base.
That's honestly one of the things that I love about this hobby. The community really it's non-parasitic. People want to share information. Especially people that have had those problems. I went through the pain of understanding how to raise Caridina in our specific temperatures and climates and water.
Yes.
I would love to share that information with you. That means my pain was not in vain, So that's kind of like what I love about this hobby. And the other thing is you cannot cheat the hobby. No amount of money, no amount of equipment or whatever. If you're trying to breed a specific thing, you have to get it right through experience. You are not going to buy a tank that's going to work. There is no set and forget kit. There is no methodology that's just going to work for everyone from the bat. Everyone's going to have issues. They're going to be unique to them. Ask the questions, because I guarantee you your neighbors had the same problem, and he's the guy 100%. That is best fit to answer it for you.
That's great. And maybe that's the right way to end this off, just by recommending connection with people. And that's what, the two of us connected in terms of being able to share a passion in this hobby. And I would encourage, as you have done, others to do exactly that. Yeah. So, Tristan, from my side, just a huge thank you for your time today. I know you've got lots of things that will keep you busy for the rest of the day, I'm quite sure. But just from my side and from the Ox Fisherman community and from the Aquarist Edge podcast side of things, just a huge thank you for your time and the passion you bring to this hobby. Thank you for the time that you put into your YouTube videos. They certainly are inspirational. And as I mentioned earlier, there will be a link to Tristan's YouTube channel and the WhatsApp group in the description of this video. So folks, thanks for tuning in. Thank you for giving up your time to watch this conversation. There will be more of these interviews coming up in the months ahead. If there's anybody you would like me to interview, please send me their name and I'll reach out and see if we can get them onto this video series. So folks, stay curious, keep learning, and keep enjoying this fantastic hobby.
Thanks so much.
See you next time.
Cheers.
That's it for this episode of the Aquarist Edge. Please consider subscribing to this podcast so that you don't miss further episodes. We would love it if you would also rate and review the podcast, as this helps make it visible to others. Until next time, keep learning and discovering, and keep finding your Aquarist Edge in this captivating and fascinating hobby.